All right, thank you very much. Carmen, as I was saying earlier, our friend talk tonight is with Christine Qunta, coming all the way from Cape Town. Ma'am Qunta, welcome.
Thank
It's
you.
good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming all the way from Cape Town to talk to us. The legal fraternity has been under so much huge scrutiny, especially in the context of, various judgments that, keep coming out of the Constitutional Court over the number of years, whole issues that relate to some of the conduct of people on the bench and so on. So one, looked at the establishment of the Legal, Practice Council as a positive step towards beginning to examine how that fraternity is aligning with the fact that we are now in a new era and everything seems to need to change in terms of responding to how our nation is growing. Please take us through a little bit of the reason for existence, if you like, of the Legal Practice Council before we come to what you have found in the year that you have worked.
Okay. So you may know that prior to the 1 November 2018, when the Legal Practice Council came into being, the legal profession had two branches, what we call colloquially the side bar, which is the attorney's profession, and then the bar, which is advocates.
Oh, advocates, yes.
So we have a split profession, unlike in some countries, like in Zimbabwe, where it's fused, and attorneys can appear in court,
yes.
and so on. So prior to 1 November, the advocates profession had, through the General Council of the Bar, governed and regulated advocates, and the law societies, there were 4 of them, they regulated the attorney's profession. And what has happened with the Legal Practice Council, which is significant, is that now the Legal Practice Council regulates both parts of the profession. And that's quite new. And yes, the legal profession is very conservative. And like the rest of the institutions in our country, it is dominated by white males. And Africans are the minority of the legal profession. So what is quite significant about the Legal Practice Council is that the Legal Practice Act, specified that it should be demographically representative. And it went further. The rules, the National Forum, which was an interim body between the existing regulators, being the GCB and the Law Society, and the LPC. So there were 2 years of
in a sense, amalgamating those.
Yes. And rules were done so that they were very specific about the number of black males, black females, and white males. So the Legal Practice Council, for the first time in the history of this country, is actually demographically representative of the whole country. So black people are in the majority. When you say black people, African, Indian, colored, they are in the majority, and which is how it should be. So that's very significant. And then the previous bodies, regulatory bodies, are now really transformed into being lobby groups and so on, and we work with them.
Not branches of the LPC?
No.
Formally at all?
No.
So they've dissolved?
Yes, they haven't dissolved. They've transformed themselves.
From regulatory into advocacy groups?
Yes,
almost
absolutely.
Advocating for their particular interest group, if
correct.
Advocates or attorneys.
And we work with them because obviously we are in a transition, and when we came in, it was like we were running. We were just fighting fires. Sure. And we work with them. So you have the GCB and their constituents bars, and then you have the Law Society of South Africa, and we work very well with them. But there are 9 provinces. So the LPC delegates, in terms of the Act, the LPC delegates some of its functions to the Provincial Council. So prior to this, that's another major transformation. You only had 4 provincial law societies, and each of them were independent. They had all their rights to regulate.
This was based on the 4 provinces of the old South
Absolutely,
Africa.
yes. And now what is done now, we now have 9 provincial councils. So that even those outlying areas like Limpopo, the Northern Cape, they have their own provincial council.
Just just for the sake of our viewers who may not be aware with what happens in the profession. So if you want to be a lawyer, the LPC would then, in a sense, regulate how you get to be a lawyer or how you can be removed from, as they say, in the role of practice.
Yes. So the LPC, you must be admitted through the LPC.
Yes.
The LPC sets the exams for admission.
Okay.
The LPC will determine if you should be removed from the role of practicing legal practitioners.
Yes.
Although it has delegated some of those functions to the provincial council. So the provincial councils, for instance, will issue articles for advocates and pupillage to candidate attorneys, and they do all the sort of basic regulatory functions, and they will suspend you, but it's only the LPC that can remove you from the role.
Yes. Well, and are you saying there was a resistance to the new regime, so to speak? Would you then say that the continued existence of the old structures, whatever the purpose may be now, may be a way of not having full confidence in the LPC? What's your own assessment, without being too diplomatic about it?
Well, the LPC and the legal profession, as I said, is really a microcosm of South Africa. And what that means is that those who have benefited from the past and benefited from the exclusion of black people, particularly African people, it's very difficult for them to adjust to change.
And then let go of and
Yes.
allow a new setup that doesn't have the same privilege.
Yes, so it's very difficult if you've been the regulatory body and suddenly that's been taken away from you. So there are challenges and there is resistance, but I think we have a very strong LPC and the Act is very clear. So we have a mandate in terms of the Act and the LPC, we have very vigorous debates, and if I can show you how there was a lot of resistance, I was told by someone the Act had to go through 14 different versions.
Iterations, yes, 14.
Absolutely. And also you're dealing with lawyers, so you can argue for an hour about one
overweight,
word. Yes. So I think there's that, but I think there's gradually a realization that actually there's only one regulatory body, and that is the LPC. And the LPC is not shy to confirm that and to act in accordance with its mandate. So that's the good thing.
Yeah.
Because for us, and I think most share that, we're not going to change South Africa by being scared of asserting what legislative powers we have. And we believe that in the end, we are acting in the public interest. And if I can make you an example, for instance, we have 32,000 legal practitioners in the country. That is both advocates and attorneys who are enrolled. And 17,000 of those are white male and females. And black people, who constitute 91% of the country, are only 14,000. And the lowest number of that are African women. So you'll see that one of the major mandates and objectives of the Act and our role is to create access to the profession. And that has a knock-on effect, because in terms of delivering legal services to the population, we are far behind countries, say, like Australia. Let me just make an example. We have these 32,000 lawyers. That means we have one lawyer for 1,800 members of the public, per one lawyer to 1,800 people.
It's a huge ratio.
In Australia, Australia has 76,000 lawyers. There are only 25 million people. And they have one lawyer per 339 people. The US is even lower, it's 250. Brazil, I think, is another 300.
Okay,
So we're behind.
Okay, I want to come to that in terms of the assessment of what you found, in terms of the legal profession itself, in terms of certain aspects of transformation like gender, for example, on the bench, but also transformation of how the profession itself carries itself out. You gave an example about attorneys appearing in Zimbabwe as opposed to here. Why can't attorneys appear? Because it just creates a necessary cost structure that sometimes is not understandable. We'll talk about that straight after the break. We're talking to Christine Qunta, who's making us understand how the law profession works as part of the LPC that is now finished 1 year in operation. Let's take a break now.